Part 50. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 497. Damn, where is this guy hiding now? You are just teasing us. There are more young masters than men who hide their heads and tails. The fat man wiped the sweat from his forehead and cursed. To be honest, the relationship between the fat man and Subai was not very good or bad, but under the premise that the two sides had helped each other many times, there must have been some problems. There is a feeling of cherishing heroes without knowing each other. At least, they agree that they are the same kind of people and of the same class. Therefore, when the fat man knew the truth of the matter, he immediately prepared to come over and help Subai solve the matter without saying a word, because no matter who this matter happened to, he would be hysterical and crazy. Not to mention, the fat man also understood, I actually played a supporting role in this matter, and this matter really has something to do with me. I know where he is. Subai pursed his lips, stretched out his hand, and pointed downward to the service station. It's impossible for him to hide in a nearby mountain and observe us with a telescope, because for him, not cool enough. I can tell that he must be hiding among the crowd at the service station below. When I ran uphill quickly, he must have been looking at me, and then he cursed me in his heart, feeling proud. You know, I can almost completely simulate his mentality, like a little daughter-in-law who enters her husband's house with her boyfriend for the first time, coy and shy, and wants to refuse but welcomes him. The fat man listened to Subai's words and smiled. I'm scared to death, baby. I thought you were going to go crazy and kill all the hundreds of people in the service station. I would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. Subai looked at the fat man. Actually, it's not impossible. The fat man was stunned for a moment, then waved his hand and said, Damn, don't, Dabai, it's not worth it. Yes, it's not worth it. Subai nodded. I am alive now, I can live openly, I can have the power of a god, and I can continue to experience what I like and expect in the story world. Struggle, and I still have a precious son waiting for me at home. As long as I live a life that I feel comfortable with, as long as I live a life that I feel happy with, as long as I live a life that I feel comfortable with. So, for him, it's just complete torture. A smile appeared at the corner of Subai's mouth. He likes to play this kind of hiding game with me, but it means how deep the resentment in his heart is. In fact, he can no longer restrain himself. The fat man nodded. Yes, Dabai, it's best if you think so. Damn it, it's true that a mental patient has a broad mind, and you actually spoke out his philosophical feelings. Killing him is necessary, and torturing him is also necessary. Subai touched his pocket and found that he had smoked out all the cigarettes, but him alone is not enough. I'm going to kill his whole family. The fat man was very good at this, so he immediately took out his cigarette and threw it to Subai. The two men sat down on the hillside together. Below, there was a smooth wall, and the traces of the debris flow were clearly visible, giving people a very scary feeling. Dabai, it's a good thing that you are a person with an unusual spirit. Otherwise, anyone else would collapse if this happened to him. The fat man spat downwards and pointed to his head. If it were me, I must have gone really crazy. Actually, it doesn't matter if you think about it. Subai looked at himself and spread his hands. I don't have a childhood. There is actually not much difference between having and not having childhood. The fat man comforted. When I was a child, my grandfather forced me to learn Taoism. I knew it was a trick to fool people, but I still had to learn it hard. When I was in school, my classmates laughed at me for being a little bastard. Every time I was bullied by my classmates, I went home and cried to my dad and grandpa, and they beat me up again, saying that I was blaspheming the family heritage. After listening to the radio to strengthen the physique of a Taoist priest and starting to practice Taoism in earnest, I discovered that the family inheritance in my family is probably really one of my ancestors who was defrauded of his savings by a beggar on the road with a Taoist secret book. To be honest, Dabai, if there were no radio, Do you think I could sit here with you now, smoking cigarettes and farting? I am probably living in the countryside of Sichuan, waiting and expecting every day, hoping that more people around me will die, so that I can have a business, and I will be invited to do legal work, and I can collect some money. Light up a cigarette, haha, just spend the day fooling around. Moreover, even in rural areas, there are fewer and fewer people who believe this. My grandfather and father were still stubborn. When they were still alive, they forced me to inherit the family business. I was asked to continue studying and follow my dad directly to do idle things. Of course, I was not good at studying at that time and had no intention to study. In fact, if this line of work continues, it will probably become an intangible cultural heritage and an antique in the near future. The fat man took a drag on his cigarette, blew out a smoke ring, thought for a moment, and shook his head. However, to be fair, I'm still a little happier than you. Yes, at least you are your own childhood, and I am someone else's childhood. From the beginning, I was an unconscious and ignorant ghost. I was imprisoned in that person. Wherever he goes, where I go, what does he do? I just watched what he was doing. Even. Subai took out the photo and unfolded it in front of the fat man. Even if you look at me when I took the first family photo, I had cautious hope in my eyes. Obviously, although I was just an unconscious kid at the time, I instinctively regarded this home as a place for myself to live. I also wanted to put myself in this family portrait. Become a part of this family, even if it is just a little desire. This is just a little bit of unrealistic luxury. My memory at that time should be completely erased, otherwise, I couldn't be him, I couldn't be Subai, I couldn't have this body, and I couldn't have this name. Of course, it is impossible to be recruited by the broadcast. Subai took a deep breath, and then spit it out heavily. I am a substitute, I am used to ward off disasters, I am a consumable. My mission is to be broadcasted because of my so-called relationship with my parents. Entering the radio, becoming a listener on behalf of their real son, experiencing the listener's near-death disaster, so that their real son can truly live in the future. According to the rules of radio, since it has chosen me to be a listener, there is nothing to do with their real son. Dabai the fat man patted Subai's shoulder. At least you came over. Although they can't call it a failure, for you, it is actually a success. Yes, for Subai, it was actually a success. He did not become cannon fodder in the world of horror broadcasts, and did not die quickly and quietly. He was still alive and well, and now, he is still a truly strong person who is at the top even among seniors. The real Subai, the guy who should really be the owner of this body, although he avoided the cause and effect of the broadcast, and although he successfully did not become a listener, he lived like a rat in a stinking ditch, let alone after hiding in that bronze box for so many years and losing the chance to regain his body. When he came out of the box, he discovered that his scapegoat was actually alive and well. Things probably really changed from the moment my parents decided to get into a car accident. Subai took out his wallet from his clothes, which contained a driving notebook. Subai held it in his hand and swung it around, opening and closing the driving notebook. Fat man, I actually saw some old memory fragments through some means before. They erased the memories in my mind, but they probably didn't expect that I would really grow into a senior listener, and they didn't expect that I would really grow into a senior listener. Because of a chance at the beginning, I exchanged the dilapidated vampire blood and drank it, and embarked on the path of strengthening the vampire clan. Fatty, I have always wondered whether my memories are really stored in my blood. The foundation of the blood clan is blood, and blood is your soul. Moreover, the human body will metabolize, and cells will continue to divide and decompose. Therefore, the blood in your body now is definitely not the blood in this body at that time. Rather than saying that what is stored in your blood is the memory of that time, it is better to say that the depths of your soul are actually imprinted with some memory fragments from that time that touched your heart, even if a powerful person erases a person's memory. At that time, I didn't dare to clean it thoroughly. I could only erase it and add some seals, otherwise unless I was ready to turn this person into a fool. Fatty analyzed. Oh, then everything makes sense. Sudbai smiled. Actually, I saw myself in a glass incubator. At that time, what was in front of me was that painting, it keeps turning over. As Sudbai spoke, he continued to shake his driver's license, which was also flipping. I thought that my parents gave birth to me through surrogacy but were too lazy to care about me, so they used this method to construct a false childhood for me. However, the fact is that I was wrong. If it was this kind of cramming of memory, it would not take several years at all. I estimate that a few days would be enough. Because you see, the speed at which that painting was flipped was actually not much slower than the speed at which I flip through my driver's license now. They filled the painting with the real Sudbai's childhood paintings and filled my mind with the car accident. Left, I took over this body from that moment on. Dabai, if you want to cry, the baby can lend you his shoulder. As he said that, the fat man patted his shoulder and motioned for Sudbai to look over. Sudbai threw away the cigarette butt, looked at the fat man with a little disgust, and asked. A baby weighing more than 300 pounds. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 498. Damn, fatty rarely comforts people, and you're actually taunting me. The fat man looked like his little heart was hurt. Sudbai stood up, tilted his head slightly, and then stretched. Fat man, the radio's certification of a listener is the certification of a soul, right? The radio thinks you are a listener, and you are the listener. Even if you take over a pig's body, the pig will be sent to the story world to do tasks. In fact, sometimes the radio is difficult to understand because it is so high up. It is almost omniscient and omnipotent, but sometimes radio is easy to understand because it really makes sense and makes more sense than anyone else. Because it has the qualification to be reasonable, so under this premise, truth is truth. Sudbai stretched out his hand and pointed to the highway service station below. There were hundreds of people there, but the fat man knew exactly who Sudbai was referring to. The bronze box fell into my hands by chance. Sudbai licked his lips and continued, that time, maybe, it was not an accident. There were high-level listeners, no, even me. It is unknown whether those two cheap parents have surpassed the level of advanced listeners. The bronze box falling into my hands that time should be the cause and effect arranged by them. No matter what I was doing at that time, no matter where I was at that time. What to do? I can do it. I will always come across that bronze box, and that bronze box will definitely fall into my hands by various chances. Sudbai's eyes gradually revealed a look of understanding, and the entire context of his life experience and his role had actually gradually become clearer. I remember that at that time, I had just come into contact with horror broadcasts, and I was just an experiencer. I must have just completed the second experience mission. Then, when I was living in a hotel next to the school, I was extremely eager because of my new blood. There happened to be a robber next door, so Sudbai caught the robber and sucked his blood without any psychological pressure. Then when I was thinking of going to an abandoned factory in the suburbs to find a place to dispose of the body, I happened to encounter a police roadblock setting up a roadblock to investigate smuggling. The smuggling car was right in front of me. The other party forced the car to reverse and escape. A female policeman got into my car and asked me to help intercept it. The interception failed in the end, and the body in the trunk of Sudbai's car was not discovered because the other party attracted the police's attention. However, 2 or 3 hours later, when Sudbai drove the car to an abandoned factory to dispose of the body, the two cultural relic smugglers also ditched the police and arrived there. Among them, there was also an old man who practiced martial arts. His kung fu was very powerful in the eyes of ordinary people. At that time, he had just strengthened his vampire physique, but he still couldn't beat him. However, the old man was deceived by his bloodline instinct and thought that he had already. After he died, he went into internal strife to take away the bronze box. After killing another partner, he opened the bronze box. Then, the old man died. The soul was drawn into the bronze box. The bronze box fell into his hands inexplicably. Fortunately, having learned from the past, Subai did not try to open the box without authorization. However, since the bronze box was a good thing, Subai, who had just become an audience, was naturally reluctant to throw it away. It happened that Subai had already decided to stop studying and return to his hometown in Chengdu to deal with the next step with peace of mind. In the story world, he asked Brother Ju to help transport the bronze box back to his home in Chengdu. After all, Subai didn't have the ability to take this thing on a plane in an eye-catching manner at that time. As a result, not long after he arrived in Chengdu, ninth brother also came back, but ninth brother was obviously affected by the bronze box, and finally fell into a coma and was sent to the Chengdu nursing home by Subai. In fact, maybe when he took the bronze box to find brother ninth for help, brother ninth already knew what he was going to do. In fact, someone may have even ordered brother ninth to do this. "Fat man, do you still have cigarettes?" Subai asked. Yes, the fat man took out 2 cigarettes, bit them in his mouth, lit them together, then took out one and handed it to Subai. Subai took a deep breath. "My mind is a little messed up now." "It's okay, just take your time and rationalize it." Fatty didn't think it was a big deal, because Subai's matter was already very complicated, and the more clearly this matter was explained, the greater the damage to Subai's heart would be. The fat man continued to look down while holding a cigarette, and muttered, "Grandson, come here, stare at your fat man a few more times, so that your fat man can find out who you are." The fat man actually knew that this was a useless effort, but he could still express his feelings in front of Subai. At the same time, the fat man sighed in his heart. If the monk and Gyatso were not lying at home in a vegetative state at this time, if these 2 guys were here at this time, here, maybe 4 people working together to find a way can really pull that guy out from the crowd. "Fat man, why didn't brother ninth open the box to me?" Subai remembered that he drove the bronze box to the express station run by brother ninth himself. If brother ninth had been raped by him several years ago, the 2 cheap parents gave instructions to open the box in front of them when they went to find him with the bronze box. But why didn't ninth brother do that? Is it really just because of the relationship between him and brother ninth after his parents left in a car accident? This possibility is not impossible, but Subai thinks to himself that he is not that charming, and he is actually a bit mean and selfish in his behavior, and he is not so moved that ninth brother even forgets his parents' instructions. Well, the most likely reason is that your charisma is so impressive that brother ninth is reluctant to watch you die. The fat man frowned after finishing speaking. Obviously, the fat man himself did not believe this reason. Fatty believes that human nature is inherently evil. He thinks about everything from the worst perspective and tries his best to put the truth, goodness, and beauty of human nature into the last possibility, provided that all other possibilities are eliminated. Only then can we say, well, it is the brilliance of human nature that is shining. Or, Fatty muttered, "Dabai, when you took this bronze box to brother ninth and asked him to help you check it, did anything strange happen?" Subai closed his eyes and began to remember. "To be honest, it happened nearly 2 years ago, and my memory is indeed not that clear." The key point is that Subai didn't expect that what he thought was a very ordinary thing at the time, or an accident, could actually hide such a big thing. The profound meaning, and crisis. Suddenly, 2 bright black eyes appeared in Subai's mind. Auspicious. Subai immediately opened his eyes and said, "If I remember correctly, that day I put the bronze box in the car and took it to brother ninth. Then I seemed to sleep at brother ninth's place for one night. When I got up and sat in my car the next day, Jixiang was sitting on my in the passenger seat. That black cat, the fat man clapped his hands. Damn, it's true that the truth, goodness, and beauty of human nature are unreliable. Here's the reason. Jixiang, it must be Jixiang. By the way, don't Lichi basically live in Chengdu? Why was Jixiang in Jiangsu at that time? That day was the first time I met Jixiang, and then he sent me a private message through the Kongbu 66 public WeChat account administrator, and also added Lizi's WeChat account. Lichi's meaning at that time seemed to be that Jixiang had gone missing. Since it was by my side and I was a listener, it asked me to bring Jixiang back to Chengdu, because I was still on the way at that time. As Subai spoke, his face immediately became serious. Yes. This matter. It's such a coincidence, it's simply incredible. It seems that it is really the black cat. Because the black cat is there is no way to open the bronze box to you, especially since you were just a first-time listener at that time and had just listened to the radio for a short time. Although I have the same bloodline, my strength and vigilance are incomparable to you now. Subai nodded. If this is really the case, then it will be straightened out. Ji Xiang's appearance at that time was definitely not an accident, but an inevitable one, even an arrangement. Haha, the fat man suddenly laughed, then stood up from the ground and patted his pants. When gods fight, mortals suffer. That's indeed the truth, Subai agreed. Because, what happened 2 years ago was already obvious. At that time, the layout left by his parents was taking effect, and he had been selected as a listener by the radio. So as long as the bronze box was opened in front of him, his soul it will be sucked into it, and the original soul inside may take over your body. No, to be precise, your body will be returned to its original owner. Then, the broadcast will still believe that your soul represents the real Subai and is its chosen audience. Therefore, your soul will be recruited by the broadcast again to reinvent a body in the horror broadcast to complete the story mission, and the real Subai may have his own body again and don't need to worry about broadcasting. He just needs to be as low-key as possible to live a happy life. But from what happened in the cave under the sea in Qinhuangdao, it can be seen that Lizi has been playing games with his cheap parents. It is obvious that Jixiang's appearance in his car at that time was also Lizi's arrangement. At that time, Jixiang stopped him. Juji wanted to complete the task assigned by his parents. Then, when Juji transported the bronze box back to Chengdu, Lizi asked Fatty to take the bronze box away from Subai. At this moment, a picture suddenly appeared in Subai's mind. That time, he should have brought Jixiang back to Chengdu and delivered Jixiang to his home in the community where Lizi lived. Subai forgot whether Lichi talked to him through the door or sent him a message via WeChat afterwards. In short, Lichi said to herself something with obvious warning meaning. Be careful, there's someone just like you. At that time, Subai thought that Lichi was referring to the vitality of his next story world, and that he could indeed match it. At that time, Subai was still shocked in his heart by Lichi's terrifying and unfathomable ability to predict. But, until today, until this moment, Subai finally understood the true meaning of what Lizi said to him back then. That one, the one hiding nearby. Isn't he exactly the same person as him? In fact, to put it another way, he is the real Subai. At that time, Lichi warned herself about this matter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 499. I don't want to think about it anymore, I don't want to think about it anymore, I'm too lazy to think about it. Subai held the unburned cigarette butt in his hand and rubbed it, then took 2 steps forward, stepped on the rock wall with both feet and slid down from it. Fatty followed closely behind, but he was much more embarrassed than Subai. After all, Fatty was not strengthened by taking the flesh. Dabai, Are you planning to go back now? Fatty still couldn't believe it. With Subai's character and consistent behavior, he could actually just let it go just like that. I can't find him anyway, so why don't I stay here and continue to give him a sense of presence? Subai pursed his lips and said with a smile, according to the profit consequence theory, I was originally regarded as a consumable substitute. The dead kid is not only occupying other people's bodies, but is also doing well on the radio, so I've already taken advantage of him. Big deal. These 3 words were deliberately emphasized by Subai. It was obvious that Subai was not happy at all about taking advantage of this big deal. This hatred almost filled Subai's entire chest. Those people may be coming back. Take the high-speed train into Shanghai Station. I feel a little reluctant to miss this good show, so I'd better go back early. Whether it's revenge or something else, I still want to. I'm not qualified to say such things. As for him, he only dared to jump around a few times and make noise in front of me. I really didn't believe that he dared to continue to cling to me shamelessly and continue to wander in front of me. No matter how high the rat in the stinky ditch jumps, it is still just a rat after all. Even if you want to arrest him, you have to wait until Gyatso and the monk recover. Haha, I can't keep up with your thoughts anyway. I've been calling you Dabai for so long. In my eyes, Subai is you are Subai, no matter what you were in the past, no matter what your childhood was. I'm not your childhood sweetheart, anyway. You were you when I first met you. A name, in the final analysis, is just a name, and a body, in the final analysis, is just a body. Who has not experienced scars and broken bodies in the story world of broadcasts? This body has been repaired and restored by broadcasting so many times. To be honest, it has nothing to do with my parents. Moreover, we have strengthened our bloodline. Now we use our blood to verify DNA with our parents' blood. The results are not biological. You are who you are, by Max. The fat man said while following Subai. Subai suddenly stopped. The fat man was stunned for a moment and stopped. Fat man, what you said really moved me a little bit. After saying that, a jade bottle was thrown out by Subai and fell into the fat man's hand. Didn't you tell me before that you wanted a drop of that thing's blood? Here it is. Chicken soup for the soul is so powerful, Fatty said to himself. Obviously happiness came too suddenly. This drop of blood is restless, Subai reminded. I absorbed 2 of the 3 drops, and I didn't dare to touch the remaining drop. It's okay, let's get rid of the restless master once and for all. The fat man obviously told Subai about himself and the woman. You are quite heartless. It's better than me killing her myself, Fatty sighed. Okay, let's go put some gas in the car and go home. It was already a day after returning to Shanghai from Sichuan. Subai and Fatty got off the plane and took the subway back to Laofang's house. Because with the end of the Spring Festival holiday, the entire Shanghai city began to regain its vitality. The most obvious thing was that the entire city, many places in the city are stuck in congestion due to the wave of returns. Taking the subway is much more convenient than taking a taxi at this time. Opening the door and walking into the living room, Subai felt a sincere feeling of happiness when he saw the little guy holding the sofa with both hands and practicing walking on his own. This kind of happiness existed before, but after experiencing some recent events, Subai began to cherish this feeling especially. What I don't have, the good things I haven't experienced, I hope you have. This kind of feeling and expectation is very simple. At this moment, Dabai's mentality is the same as that of the majority of contemporary Chinese parents. Many parents themselves do not have much education. They work hard in the factory and farm hard at home. Their backs are turned to the lowest and their faces to the sky, sweating drop by drop. The ground fell on the machine, gritted his teeth, and lived frugally to support his children, hoping that his children would receive a better education and not be unconditionally able to go to school like he did when he was a child. Subai did not have a childhood, and it could even be said that he had no past, but Subai did not want this experience to happen to the little guy as well. I have suffered a lot, and all I can do now is to make my son's life easier and happier. This is the most true and simple portrayal of Mr. Su's heart now. I squatted down and clapped my hands at the little guy. The little guy immediately came over with a smile and threw himself into Dad's arms. Subai picked up his son and kissed the little guy's pink face. Jixiang also took good care of the little guy when he was away. He was clean and in good spirits. Moreover, because he was a spiritual boy, he had never been sick since birth. Sensible, well-behaved, and considerate. When thinking of auspiciousness, Subai's eyes began to wander around. "Are you looking for that black cat?" The fat man just took out a bottle of drink from the refrigerator and drank. "It's probably in the yard." Subai carried the little guy to the floor-to-ceiling window of the living room, opened the curtains, and saw Jixiang lying on the deck chair in the yard, crouching there and basking in the sun. The painting was still beside Jixiang. The sun shines on Jixiang's body, and the hair reflects a very soft light. To be honest, this cat can't be called a breed or a bloodline. It looks no different from an ordinary native cat, but it has always been. It can give people a very noble and unusual feeling. "Cat, cat!" the little guy shouted. Jixiang opened his eyes lazily, looked at the little guy, and then looked at Subai, who was holding the little guy. Then, it turned over again, probably intending to continue sleeping. Subai opened the window and walked into the yard. Putting the little guy down, the little guy swayed to the wicker chair. He grabbed the wicker chair with one hand and touched Jixiang's body with the other hand, as if Jixiang usually kept using his tail when he was sleeping. "Give him a gentle massage." Jixiang opened his eyes slightly and looked at the little guy. It could be seen that the cat was enjoying this moment very much. He obviously worked hard to take care of this child. The nominal father was often away from home and was just a hands-off shopkeeper. However, this child always became extremely happy when he saw his father come back. To say that Jixiang is not jealous is not true. It's possible that cats also have a little temper, but now the child has grown up a little and knows how to care about himself. Jixiang suddenly felt happy for Mao Sheng. Subai took out a cigarette, but seeing the little guy here, he put the cigarette back. "I know some things from the past," Subai looked at Jixiang and said. Jixiang remained calm and continued to be immersed in the atmosphere just now, but the tale he lowered gently told Subai that he was actually listening, and he was listening very seriously. Having been together for so long, one person and one cat, they must have developed a tacit understanding of each other. "Are you willing to tell me what happened in the past?" Subai asked. Miao Jixiang called and shook his head. "Then I won't ask," Subai said simply. "The past is the past after all." Jixiang glanced at Subai in surprise, probably wondering why this mentally ill person suddenly turned into a philosopher. Then, Subai squatted down in front of Jixiang, held the little guy in front of him, and faced Jixiang. "This is my son." The little guy was a little confused. He didn't know what his father meant. Jixiang understood a little better. This cat's intelligence was indeed enough to put most humans to shame. "Miao," Jixiang responded, his tone not very kind. "Those two bastards and that little bastard, sooner or later I will kill their whole family," Subai said calmly. "Also, I will not allow my son to follow my old path. I don't hope that one day my son will be like me at that time, locked in a sealed glass container, soaked in nutrient solution, staring at a painting, and next to him there is a black cat, constantly turning the pages." Subai's left eye turned dark red at this time, while his right eye turned dark black. This was a very serious warning. This was a very serious warning. Because Subai can be sure that at the beginning, it was the auspiciousness in front of him, turning the pages of the scroll in front of him, instilling memories in himself. Subai didn't know what role Jixiang played in it. But Subai would never let this happen to the little guy again. "Meow. Ji Xiang neighed in his throat, obviously with a tit-for-tat meaning, obviously telling Subai, "Who are you warning?" "If you don't agree." Subai picked up the little guy with one hand, took out the Hellfire shotgun with the other hand, and pointed it at Ji Xiang's forehead. "We can end it now." Ji Xiang slowly climbed up with his front paws, ready to pounce on Subai, and the hair all over his body stood on end at this moment. One person and one cat, the energy of both sides collided desperately at this time. "Cat, cat be good, cat, be good." The little guy in Subai's arms stretched out his little fleshy hand to Jixiang. The little guy might not understand what his daddy was talking about, but he should instinctively sense the strange atmosphere around him. Like a deflated rubber ball, Jixiang took the lead in removing the energy from his body, and then stretched out his fleshy claws and placed them on the little guy's fleshy palm. Subai knew clearly. This is considered auspicious agreement and auspicious promise. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 500. Are you really willing to let your son continue playing with that cat? The fat man in the living room saw Subai coming back from the courtyard and said, obviously, the fat man didn't quite understand Subai's decision. Of course, from a subconscious point of view, the fat man had a good impression and perception of the black cat. There was a big monster at home. Being on guard does give people a sense of security, isn't it? Subai turned sideways and saw the little guy playing happily with Ji Xiang in the courtyard. He shook his head. "Fat man, sometimes animals are more trustworthy than people." "It sounds like you are scolding me," the fat man muttered and threw a bottle of orange juice to Subai. "By the way, Dabai, are you really planning to go to the train station?" "Anyway, I am idle, why don't you go?" Subai asked back. At the same time, Subai was a little strange. According to Fatty's temperament, he should be the most active and proactive when encountering such things. Why this time? Have you become so helpless? "Fat man, have you changed your gender?" "No, it's just that I heard some news recently." "I don't know how you learned about the train station, but I think you don't know this news," the fat man said as he sat on the sofa. "Those high-end listeners are afraid to go to the train station. You should know this." Subai nodded. "However, although senior listeners cannot go, they can cooperate with some senior listeners. For example, they can lend some of their magic weapons to senior listeners, or lend out some of their guardian totems and the like, and then get the benefits, come back and share." "Is someone looking for you?" Subai asked. The fat man shrugged. "No. It seems that those high-level listeners are really blind." "That's right, that's because they have eyes for gold and jade," the fat man said without blushing. "Why don't you say that your reputation of pretending to be a pig and eating the tiger in the circle is already a bit bad, and those high-level listeners don't dare to come to you for fear that you will take advantage of others?" The fat man was speechless for a moment. "I have made an appointment with Gongzi Hai, but when the time comes, we can wait and see from the side. If there is a chance, we will come. If there is no chance, we will just welcome the hero's triumphant return." "Then do I have to order a banner and get some little red flags?" the fat man joked. "As you wish." Subai touched his chin, "but, I always feel that the probability of those people coming back this time is very small, otherwise the undercurrent would not be so intense." "Isn't that young Master Hai related to Li Ji?" Fatty analyzed. "He has begun to recruit you to act together. I guess those people who came back are really in trouble this time." Subai shook his head. "That's not right. It had only been a few months since we last went to Qinhuangdao. At that time, I remember that Li Ji could still get in touch with Gongzi Hai, which meant that Li Ji's situation there was not bad at that time. Then, this group of people who came back may be just a part of them. They are similar to the blood corpses. They are eager to come back, but they should go through the official channels of broadcasting. As for Lizzie, it is very likely that they did not come from this group at all. When Bali comes back, she may still be there. If your hypothesis is true, Fatty put the drink in his hand on the coffee table, then, Gongzi Hai is so keen to attract people to the train station, he should know some inside information, plus he can get it from that Lizzie should not be the only strong person who sends out messages to connect with the audience here. Therefore, this may mean that the situation of these strong people who came back is actually very bad. Even for senior people, he is also very weak, and may even have died on the way. It's very likely that this is the case, so many senior people and many other forces will swarm over like sharks that smell blood and want to snatch the inheritance they left behind. Subai pursed his lips. Perhaps, this may be a situation that the broadcaster would like to see. How do you say this? Apparently, the fat man didn't understand it yet. Do you still remember the last blood corpse incident? The blood corpse committed such a big crime. One person killed all the high-level listeners in Shaanxi. The broadcast pulled him into the story world and crushed him, and then, the broadcast chose one when a group of people enter the story world. The highest reward in that story world is to obtain the inheritance of the blood corpse. The last time I was in that story world, I heard the radio announcer's opening remarks, which basically meant that the audience was like the vegetables grown by the radio. Those vegetables that were irregular or damaged were also the painstaking efforts and watering of the radio, so the radio we won't throw away the dead vegetables, but we will reconvert them into fertilizer to feed the next generation of vegetables. That train that doesn't know when it will come back. It's probably a trainload of fertilizer, Fatty answered. Damn, this sounds really awkward. It's like we are just being good babies and helping the broadcaster to gain favorability with real-life tasks. The broadcaster will pick an extra spoonful of shit and give it to us as a reward. The words are rough, but the reasoning is not rough. Subai looked towards the bedroom and sighed. It's a pity that the monk and Gyatso can't wake up now. Otherwise, the four of us would form a team and we could always grab a piece of meat no matter what the situation. As soon as this topic came up, the fat man fell silent, because the fat man knew that he had no way to shirk responsibility for the previous dangers of the monk, Gyatso, and Subai. If he hadn't been sure that the lamas would not kill him, he knew that he would not kill him. When facing the enemy, they obediently did not resist, and Subai, Gyatso, and the others would not suddenly encounter such a great danger. Fat man, let's make a tentative decision now. You and I, just two people. Anyway, the goal is to protect ourselves first, and then to observe. As for the end of the fight, we will see what happens. What about young Master Hai? You asked knowingly, Subai said. Hey, it proves that I am more trustworthy than that ladyboy, right? That's right, Subai said non-committally. If you have to choose between being tricked and tricked behind someone's back, I think I'd rather be tricked by you than have the benefits taken away by others. The fat man stood up, walked to Subai, and patted Subai on the shoulder. That's right, I feel the same way. I think it's far enough here, Xie Zhen said while driving. We've already arrived in Huayan. Forget it, just give me another ride, to Suzhou, and then I'll take the high-speed rail, Liang Sen said while looking at the newspaper in his hand. Boss, you really might as well buy a plane ticket in Shanghai from the beginning. Going abroad may be more troublesome. After all, if listeners of your level go to other countries, it is likely to cause panic among listeners in other regions. But you can go to the Midwest. Think of cities as tourism. I used to think that after leaving Shanghai and arriving at Nantong, I would be fine, but after crossing the Sutong Bridge and arriving at Nantong, I still felt uneasy, Liang Sen said with a frown. Nantong and Shanghai are separated by the Yangtze River, Xie Sun said with a slight smile. He knew his boss's mood and knew that his boss was afraid. In comparison, his subordinate seemed very relaxed. Perhaps this is why stupid people are blessed. It's just the Yangtze River, it's not safe, Liang Sen sighed. I'm really scared. Liang Sen didn't mind showing his fear and cowardice in front of his subordinates at all. After all, when his aura was deliberately revealed in the last broadcast, he was so frightened that he huddled up at the foot of the table, trembling and crying. At that time, this subordinate of mine has been standing by and witnessed all this. We have already arrived in Huaiyan, which is almost half of Jiangsu province from Shanghai, Xie Zhen reminded. It's still not safe. I can't pin my safety on the ethics of broadcasting. You know, oh no, you don't know. Broadcasting actually has no ethics at all. It wants to deliberately hide my unwillingness to improve my strength. Those who suppress their own realm and are unwilling to understand cause and effect are dragged to that place. Even if it means being cannon fodder. Liang Sen spoke in a very strong and rough tone, which was obviously out of character. Of course, for a person who was highly emotionally and mentally nervous, it was indeed a normal behavior. Actually, it's quite good to be a cannon fodder, Xie Zhen said. That's because you don't understand that fear, Liang Sen reminded. I would like to give it a try. Boom. Before Xie Zhen finished speaking, Liang Sen punched Xie Zhen on the body. Xie Zhen smashed the car door and flew out of the car. He broke the highway guard wall on one side and slid down the slope, leaving a trace of a ravine on the highway. Liang Sen's figure appeared directly in front of Ji Zhen, holding a fist in one hand against Ji Zhen's chest. Do you want to try it out? When you encounter that feeling of fear, will you be like me, like your boss, scared like a fool? Ji Zhen shook his head and said seriously. Boss, you are not acting like a fool. You really were a fool at that time. Well. Liang Sen did not continue to be angry or furious, but sighed and sat down next to Xie Zhen. I also feel that I am like this, a big fool. Xie Zhen sat up and slowly picked off the grass clippings from his clothes. You are actually one step away from being an advanced audience, or even half a step away. By then, you will know what it feels like. I'm really looking forward to it, Xie Zhen said with a smile. Get up, keep driving, and take me to Suzhou railway station. The car door is broken. Then stop another car. Boss, where do you plan to take the high-speed rail from Suzhou? Xie Zhen asked. Go to Dandong. It's very close to North Korea. It is said that the leader of North Korea is a son of the universe, a great man descended from heaven. He should be able to help you, boss. Block the threat from the radio. Hey, let me tell you, are you possessed by Pikachu's brother today? Huh? What's the name of Pikachu's brother? My skin is itching. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 501. Today, the temperature in Shanghai has reached below zero, and the puddles on the roadside are also covered with ice. The desolate air is in obvious conflict with the city's booming popularity. However, no matter how lively the city is, this home is always peaceful. Subai sat in the living room and read a book. This was a type of publication that was banned even in Europe and the United States. It explained in detail various killing techniques as well as religious language with a bewitching nature. This was a gift from the zombie boy to Subai. It was delivered to Subai by express delivery. Subai did not ask him on WeChat if he was willing to go to the train station and wait for the opportunity, because the acquaintance and encounter between the two parties was based on a kind of artistic beauty that was so remote that only two people could understand it. So try to make this pure. Let's continue to maintain the relationship with the land. When we meet in the future, we fight when we have to, and we kill when we have to, just like two strangers, without any grudges or hesitations. This is the most suitable way for two people to get along. Picking up the coffee on the coffee table, Subai took a sip. Now he was used to drinking this kind of instant coffee. The material enjoyment seemed to be getting farther and farther away from him. Only occasionally, he would miss it a little, but he missed it. The other things involved made Subai not very comfortable, so most of the time, he didn't even bother to remember him. The little guy had just been watching cartoons on his tablet, and now he was lying on the sofa and fell asleep. Children are like this. They play hard and get sleepy very quickly. Jixiang found a small blanket and covered the little guy's body, watching over him. Putting down the book in his hand, gently kneading and relaxing his wrist, Subai stood up from the chair. The time for the broadcast to resume is getting closer and closer, but the train has not yet arrived. But everyone knows that it is soon, really soon. Jixiang was prostrate under the sofa. When Subai walked past it, it didn't even raise its head. Since Subai had a showdown with it last time, this cat has become even more indifferent to Subai, showing off its cold demeanor. Got enough. Walking to the monk's bedroom and looking at the monk who was still lying motionless on the bed, Subai sighed, stretched out his hand, opened the curtains, and opened the window a little to let the air circulate a little. It's not that there is any strange smell in the room. If a normal person lies in a room motionless, there will definitely be that unpleasant smell in the room, but the monk is different. This guy is lying here, and his body is actually exuding a kind of sandalwood. Fragrant. It's not that there is any spice hidden in the clothes, but this guy's body fragrance. Yeah, it smells pretty good. Subai and Fatty recently like to wander around the monk's house and stay for a while when they have nothing to do. This sleep is comfortable enough. Subai looked at the monk, took out a cigarette and shook it on his fingertips. You should just take it as a good rest. The monk was still lying there, motionless. Subai still remembered that the first time he met the monk was on his way to Josegu for a self-driving trip. The monk drove this van, and inside there were the corpses of a family of 3 who were about to become corpses. Now, in a flash, it has been nearly 2 years. Subai lit the cigarette, not caring that this was the patient's bedroom. Anyway, compared with the monk's body fragrance, it was just drizzle. After smoking a cigarette in the monk's bedroom, Subai walked out, stood at the door of another bedroom, and looked at Gyatso lying on the bed. At this time, Subai felt like a night watchman at a funeral parlor. In the empty big house, there were 2 motionless people lying there. The fat man was shutting himself in the room at this time, probably drawing talisman. Except for coming out when eating these days, he had been shutting himself in the room. Sometimes, Subai admired this fat man. Even though he weighed only 300 pounds, he was really talented. Among the audience, he was really versatile. Putting aside the fact that the monk and Gyatso were lying on the bed unable to get up and move, Subai suddenly felt that he had been a little too decadent recently when seeing the fat man still working so hard. It seems that when he is at home, he usually spends time with his son, a bit like a retiree taking care of himself. Shaking his head and throwing away these distracting thoughts in his mind, Subai didn't have many touches or thoughts, such as Qin Yang who drove a taxi in Qinhuangdao all day long, or the zombie boy who collected art photos and punished evil and promoted good. Subai suddenly I feel that I am not so alone. It is true that many listeners are working tirelessly to improve themselves in the real world, but there are also many who have their own unique quirks in the real world. For example, Xiezhen and his boss are actually still running a game company. As soon as he thought about this, Subai saw Jixiang suddenly sitting up from the carpet next to the sofa, facing the door, his tail slightly raised. Is someone coming? Subai took out a wet wipe, wiped his hands, then walked to the entrance of the living room and opened the door. There was no one in the yard. He walked out again and opened the iron door outside. Long time no see. Outside the house, stood a young man in a straight suit, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, standing there with a very tall figure. Haha, Subai smiled and looked at Xiezhen. I never thought you were so good-looking before. Subai used the word good-looking instead of the word handsome. You are beautiful too. Xiezhen looked at Subai and replied with a smile. It was indeed refreshing for 2 grown men to compliment each other in such a way in broad daylight. Don't you invite me to come in and sit down? Xiezhen asked, or, let's go out for a walk. Xiezhen also knew that the formations in this room could not be easily shown to others. Okay, let's go for a walk. Subai closed the iron door, and walk side by side to the field on the other side. In the winter afternoon, with a slightly desolate atmosphere, two men were walking side by side on the bare and desolate fields. "You have to go to the train station, right?" Xiaozhen said as he walked. "Aren't you talking nonsense?" Subai handed Xiaozhen a cigarette, and Xiaozhen shook his head in rejection. Subai lit it himself, blew out a smoke ring, and said, "Why, you are here to join the gang. I thought you wouldn't bother to do such a thing because of your temperament." "B square cannot be used as food," Xiaozhen replied. "Among the senior people, you should be at the top of the pyramid, right? What are you worried about? If they have something in their hands that those high-level listeners deliberately left behind, I'm really not sure," Xiaozhen said honestly. Then, he took out a metal cigarette case from his pocket and took out a cigarette. "Bite it in your mouth." "Remember you told me last time that you don't smoke?" Subai asked. "That's because I thought your cigarettes were too low grade last time, so I just made an excuse to save your face." "Okay," Subai nodded. "Are your two friends not awake yet?" Ji Zhen asked. "Still a plant. Do you still remember the spiritual grass you got in the parking lot last time?" "Remember." Subai looked at Xiaozhen. "Are you running a herbal medicine shop? To you, that kind of thing is cabbage on the roadside. You can pluck as much as you want." "No," Xiaozhen denied. "In fact, I don't have many herbal medicines of that level. Moreover, their injuries were too serious, and their souls and bodies were seriously injured. It was not as bad as the last time you were just physically injured. It's simple, so it's unknown if you rely on spiritual grass to wake up. As for if you're lucky enough to wake up, you won't have enough strength to participate in this event. Then why are you telling me this? Find something to talk about. I don't want to be left in the cold, it will be too embarrassing. Plain lies cannot deceive me, dull dogmas cannot restrain me. I abandon all rules that do not lead to actual victory and happiness. Under the powerful invasion, I raise the authority of the strong. I look into the glassy eyes of your fearful Jehovah and defy him. I lift up a great axe and split open his insect-eaten skull. With a sarcastic and angry smile I wipe away all the terrible doctrines of the hypocrites. Look at that cross. What does it represent? A dull, weak figure hangs from a tree. I question everything. When I face the hateful side of your most arrogant moral dogma, I write with burning disdain, look, it's all deception. Come to me, ah! You who challenge death, this world belongs to you, keep it forever. A man wearing a devil mask held the book in his hand high and recited. Below him, a group of believers in black clothes were prostrate and praying. This is a group of people who believe in the devil, a group of people who believe in hell. The prayer ended, but none of the believers stood up. The only masked man standing put down the book in his hand, picked up a dagger next to him, and stabbed it into his palm. He watched his blood flow out drop by drop. His eyes were shining with excitement. We need to prove our loyalty to Satan, and Satan needs to see our piety. The man stuck out his tongue, licked his palm, and shouted. Tomorrow evening, at the train station, we will offer the sacrifices we have prepared to Satan, and the tourists in the station will become our gifts to Satan. Those of you who are loyal to hell, tell me, are you already excited? Below, more than 20 believers who wrapped themselves in black clothes took out machetes from their clothes and cut their palms together, letting their blood drip down. For Satan, the masked man shouted. For Satan! For Satan! For Satan! At the end of the ceremony, the masked man took off his mask, revealing an oriental face. The other believers also changed back to their clothes, and all of them also had oriental faces, as they are in real life. Ordinary people, but here, they are the most loyal believers in the devil, and they decided to do a big thing like those extreme religions to announce their existence. And the target is the train station tomorrow night. They dare not face military region and government agencies with weapons, but they dare to face unarmed ordinary people with machetes. When these people think of the passengers in the train station trembling and screaming under their machetes tomorrow, everyone couldn't help but get excited. Imagine that tomorrow the whole country, no, the whole world will be shocked by what they have done. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chun-Ji Long. Chapter 502. The masked man looked at the empty hall with a look of satisfaction in his eyes. He had been preaching here for several years and finally won over a group of believers. In fact, there are many such believer organizations all over the country. However, looking at the entire world, compared with foreign countries, China's Satanism really has no sense of existence. On the one hand, this is because Chinese traditional culture is very different from Western traditional culture, and the degree of identification with Satan is inherently different. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the church itself has not done anything. If things have a sense of existence, if they don't have a sense of existence, they won't attract the attention of the higher authorities. If the higher authorities don't pay attention, they won't suppress you. If they don't suppress you, you will have no cohesion. Without cohesion, you will have no sense of stimulation, excitement, and organization. It cannot grow stronger. This seems like a paradox, but in fact it is real. A certain religious organization that is crazily active in Iraq and Syria has almost conquered an area the size of a small country. Even in the face of joint suppression by various countries, it still continues. Hold on. On the one hand, there are dirty political deals and compromises between big countries. On the other hand, many young people with empty hearts around the world regard them as their idols. They go there from all over the world every year to actively participate in that event. There are countless young people organizing themselves to serve as soldiers. TV news often reports that a certain extremist organization claimed responsibility for a certain terrorist attack. This is also the reason. This is tantamount to advertising for oneself and giving oneself a sense of existence. Without a sense of existence, there will be no cohesion within the organization. Let the blood in the train station tomorrow ignite the influence of Satanism around the world. Satan is the only God who can lead mankind to freedom. The masked man knelt down respectfully and worshipped the sculpture in front of him. Xie Zhen and Subai were still walking on the field ridge. While walking, Xie Zhen's cell phone rang. Xie Zhen answered the phone and then hung up. The train will come tomorrow afternoon or evening. Ji Zhen looked at Subai and shook the cigarette ashes in his hand. Did your boss inform you? Subai smiled. Is he still in Shanghai? We probably arrived in Dandong by now, Xie Zhenkui said. As for whether we will cross the Yalu River in a heroic manner, I don't know. You even make fun of your boss. Haha, although he is far away from here, he still sensed the arrival of that one. He said that he expected to be inseparable tomorrow afternoon or evening. Then it will be fun. Although high-level audiences are rare, there are many in the world. It seems that I can't hide this matter. I couldn't hide it, and there will also be listeners from the West coming to Shanghai. Xie Zhen broke the news. Why are they here to join in the fun? Because the strong men from the East and the West were all arranged by the radio to leave by high-speed train in Shanghai, Xie Zhen explained. So, you understand why I am so unsure. Tomorrow, at the train station, that the water is really too deep. Subai nodded. Furthermore, when Western veterans come to Eastern territory, they will instinctively stick together. But because we are our home court, we feel that we have a psychological advantage, but it is not easy to integrate together, Subai said. These are all secondary. Westerners are actually very cautious. Because of the lychee incident in the past, and there is a certain chance that lychee will come back this time, they are very cautious. I estimate that they should arrive collectively on the plane at noon tomorrow. Come to Shanghai, and in Shanghai before, there was only one angel who was responsible for checking out the situation and getting to the bottom of it. That Birdman who calls himself the Earl. Haha, yes, that's the guy you beat. Xie Zhen stretched. When you beat him, the energy fluctuation caused attracted the attention of many people in Shanghai. Do they want me to kill the Birdman directly? Subai asked. Too bad you didn't. I'm not stupid. Haha, Ji Zhen smiled and said nothing. It's getting dark, so I won't let you have dinner. Tell me what's going on. Don't tell me that you came here specially to accompany me on the road. What if I really just came here to find you? Then we'd better not meet each other again, really. I came here to ask you a favor. Is it about the train station? I'm sorry, I can't promise you anything. Even if I promise, you won't believe it? No, in fact it's not about the train station, but I know that you have a friend who is good at formations, and your physique happens to help me and him break through that formation. Can you be more specific? My boss's house in Shanghai has a basement. Hearing this, Subai's eyes suddenly lit up and he said with a smile, actually, I would rather hear that you and your boss are pure subordinates, bosses, good friends, or gay friends, a positive relationship, instead of you taking advantage of your boss. The shady plot of preparing to pry into his lair while running away. He keeps his natural weapon sealed in the basement. Except when he takes it out before entering the story world, he doesn't usually bring it with him. There may even be a clone of him sealed in the basement. So what? I think the really interesting thing is to send my boss to that place. Xie Zhen threw the cigarette butt on the ground at this time, stretched out his foot and stepped on it, release his clone and stimulate his natural weapon. If he becomes active in the real world, then the strength that he has been suppressing and sealing will definitely not be able to continue to be suppressed. Once the broadcast has firmly sensed his true realm and level, then he will not be able to escape that this place is no longer possible. I'm curious, what's the purpose of doing this? Subai and Xie Zhen had already arrived at the door of Lao Fang's house. Xie Zhen drove over in a car, and the car was parked outside the big iron gate of Lao Fang's house. Do you want to hear the truth or lies? Listen to the lies first. Well, he and I had some differences on the development of our game company, and I wanted him to leave and go to that place. What's the truth? The truth is that what I just said is false. Xie Zhen pursed his lips. You just need to know that I have enough and suitable remuneration for you to make a deal. Make a deal. When Subai returned to the living room, the fat man must have just come out of the bathroom after taking a shower. He was wiping his head with a towel and asked, "Who is here?" "Excuse me." "Oh, are you here to form a gang again?" Subai shook his head. "No, I plan to ask us to help with something." Subai told the fat man Xie Zhen's request. It sounds quite tempting. The fat man obviously regained his true self at this time. He can trick a high-level audience and get paid for it. In addition, there is a chance to fish in troubled waters in the basement, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Aren't you curious about his real purpose? Anyway, it's always weird to trick a boss who seems to have a good relationship with you out of nowhere, right? Are you curious? Not curious? That's it, I can figure out everything in this world. After the fat man said this, he suddenly patted his chest. Damn it, fatty, I can actually say this philosophical words to come. Go to bed early. The train will be pulling into the station tomorrow afternoon or evening. Well, you should also go to bed early. After saying good night to the fat man, Subai also went into the bathroom and took a shower. When he came out, he found that the little guy was already awake, but he had been taken back to the bedroom by Jixiang and was sitting on the bed reading a fairy tale booklet. Seeing a book like this, Subai suddenly frowned and immediately walked over and picked up the fairy tale book from the little guy's hand. It's a book of fairy tales with a cover image. Not the one the zombie boy was holding. The little guy looked at Subai without knowing why, then he suddenly smiled and snuggled up to Subai. It seemed that he thought Subai was going to tell him a story from the fairy tale book. The little guy understands human speech. This is something Subai has known for a long time. He seems to understand human speech from the first day he was born, and he never wets the bed. Every time he wants to pee or they would make a sound to call Subai or Jixiang to take him to the bathroom. So sometimes Subai himself felt that the son was really easy to raise. No, he was simply too easy to raise. Holding his son in his arms, Subai took the storybook and began to tell the little guy a story. As they talked, the night gradually deepened, and the little guy fell asleep again. He didn't know whether it was because he was already dozed off or because Subai's talk was too boring and he didn't want to ruin his father's enthusiasm. So I just pretended to sleep. After putting the little guy on the bed and covering him with a quilt, Subai planned to take a rest. However, just when Subai lay down, Jixiang suddenly jumped onto the bed with the painting in his mouth. The painting was still glowing slightly with a blue light. Boom! Subai kicked Jixiang under the bed, and the painting rolled to the side. The light that had just risen slowly disappeared at this time. Jixiang, who fell under the bed, looked confused. He didn't seem to realize that this guy dared to kick him so directly. After a while, Jixiang floated up angrily, only to see that this hateful guy on the bed was already hugging his son and starting to fall asleep. Meow. Jixiang made a very small and frustrated cry, turned his head and looked at the painting that fell on the ground. Jixiang slowly fell down and took the painting in his mouth again. When he left the bedroom, he stood beside the door. Jixiang looked back at the person lying on the bed. There was a hint of understanding in the cat's eyes. If what you see in this painting is destined to happen in the future, whether to look or not to look, what is the difference and significance? Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 503. During this sleep, Subai and Fatty had a tacit understanding of sleeping until noon the next day before getting up. Just like they needed to adjust their state before entering the world of the story, they also needed to adjust their state this time when they went to the train station because there were so many places there. The crisis that arises is no less than that of the story world. To despise the enemy strategically and to pay attention to the enemy tactically is the experience of a certain founding leader, and it does apply to all aspects. After getting up, while Subai was washing up, the fat man also came out. He was supporting the bathroom wall with one hand and covering his mouth with the other hand while yawning. "Babai, why do I feel like I didn't get enough sleep?" "Then you can sleep a little longer." Subai picked up a towel and wiped his face and said. "Tch, if I can be like that monk slut and still have sandalwood coming out of my body when I sleep, I will be willing to be a sleeping prince." The fat man rolled his eyes and went in after Subai finished washing. Subai came to the living room, took out his mobile phone, and found that there were already several unread messages on it. "Fat man, hurry up, the driver is already at the door." "Driver, have you made a reservation?" Fatty shouted from the bathroom. "Gong Zihai is coming to pick us up." "Oh, he's quite positive." When Subai and Fatty finished packing and walked out the door, Gong Zihai's car was already parked outside. "Dear Fatty, dear Bai, are you two planning to go on a blind date today? Take care of yourself so neatly," Gong Zihai teased as he bent down and opened the car door like a butler. "Thank you, my dear Hai." The fat man pinched the orchid in his hand, gently touched the back of Gong Zihai's hand, and then sat in. Subai was not that extreme. He just smiled at Gong Zihai and then got into the car. "There are snacks and drinks I bought in the car. You can just eat some," Gong Zihai said as he sat in the cab. "I'm ready," Subai said while taking out the snacks. "It should be." Gong Zihai started the car. "It's still early, let's not rush to the station first, let's go for a walk first." "Where to go?" the fat man asked. "Airport." A teasing smile appeared on Gong Zihai's face. People come all the way from the west to come to our place as guests, so we have to do our best to be landlords. 20 minutes later, Gong Zihe drove the car to the road outside the airport and stopped here instead of entering the parking lot. Is there a penalty or fine for parking here? The fat man said while eating. Haha, it's okay. Gong Zihe also joked with the fat man, their plane has landed and should be out soon. Are they a group of luxury cars? The fat man asked. No, it's a bus. Their external identity is a foreign tour group. Gong Zihe reminded, there are cigarettes in the cabinet next to you, take them yourself. As he was talking, a brand new bus drove out. Subai rolled down the window and looked at the bus coming in front. There were not many people on that bus, only about a dozen people. Why are there so few people? Subai asked. I don't know about this. Maybe there are restrictions in the West, Gong Zihe said. This is also easy to understand. If this time it is not placed in Shanghai but in Milan or Paris, there will not be too many people here who dare to go there to seize food from the tiger's mouth. Most people will calculate the gains and losses and risks. There is no need to wade through this muddy water. Moreover, since they came to the East, it is estimated that most of the high-level Western listeners would not dare to lend them their magic weapons or totems to bring them to the East, and the risk of loss would be too great. The fat man explained. The bus passed by Gong Zihe's car. Subai glanced at the car windows one by one and found that the people in the car were also looking at him and others. Obviously, both parties had discovered each other. Oh, there is another acquaintance. Subai smiled and saw Sophia. Heh, there's another acquaintance. Sophia took off her headphones. Is it that stinky bat? Count Chayer was sitting next to Sophia. He had come to the airport this morning to pick her up. Naturally, he was going to the train station with the Western troops. My Lord Earl, last time there was news that you were beaten up by an Eastern audience in the East, couldn't it be him? Sophia asked with a smile. That's him, but he's 2 against 1. Next to him is the fat man who is good at formations and limits my speed and strength. Otherwise, if I were to fight him one-on-one, I don't know who would win. Earl Charles always has to maintain his image in front of women. Sophia shook her head. Even if it's 2 against 1, you won't be completely repaired by one side. At least, you can use your courage to pull a backer, so that they don't dare to force you too much. Ahem. Count Char knew that this woman was mocking him for his greed for life and fear of death. He knew that it would not matter if he was beaten and the other party would not kill him, so he simply did not resist completely. Go directly to the train station. A young man with red hair sitting at the front raised his hand and said to everyone, due to the restrictions this time, we cannot give you much guarantee in terms of food and accommodation. Please forgive me here. After all, this is the territory of Eastern audiences. When we come here, we must try to keep a low profile. In addition, after waiting at the train station, we also try not to conflict with Eastern listeners. Even if the train arrives at the station, we must act in unison and try to avoid acting alone. When we fight for unowned items, the radio will default to us entering the fight. In the causal relationship of fighting, be careful of being tricked by Easterners. Ramandovsky, where has the polar bear spirit of your Tsarist Russia gone? A young man with blonde hair and blue eyes ridiculed. Although it was a joke, in terms of tone, it did not mean tit for tat, it was just a joke. A harmless joke. There is a proverb in China that tells a good man not to suffer immediate losses. It is normal for us to try to be low-key and restrained on other people's territory. Francie, please don't make such jokes again. It will destroy our internal harmony. Earl Er reminded. Lehman's eyes swept over everyone's faces and said in a deep voice, before coming here, a senior audience member must have told you how much benefit we can get from coming to the East this time. How many benefits can we get? How many benefits can we get? How many inheritance items we can get is secondary, the most important thing is how many people we can come over and how many people can go back. So I hope everyone will put away your pride and confidence for the time being and listen to my instructions. Everyone nodded. Obviously, among the experienced listeners, it is impossible to have a stupid person. Everyone also knows where they are now. Count Charles is a lesson learned from the past. Eastern listeners have never been very friendly to Western listeners. Those people just drove off like that. The fat man seemed very unsatisfied. I originally thought that we had to stop and draw a path, and then we would have a cup of tea and a cup of coffee and meet each other. Do you think it's a gang gathering? Subai asked. Hey, is this interesting? Otherwise, these Westerners are so harmonious that it would be difficult to deal with them. The fat man stretched his waist. We are all scattered, and these Westerners have collected their eggs and gathered them together. If we encounter any unexpected situation, we will really suffer. This is what I'm most worried about, Gong Zihe said with a frown. They are obviously too united this time. People are all like this. Subai didn't think it was so strange. Generally in the story world, when there is a mix of Eastern and Western audiences, both parties will stick together. If we go to the West, we will definitely stick together. I can't talk about advantages, and I can't talk about many disadvantages. They have reached the level of senior listeners, so naturally there won't be many short-sighted people. Then let's go to the station. I'll take another route, otherwise I'll follow them like I'm escorting them. Gong Zihe restarted the car. Because they took a detour, when Subai and the others arrived at the train station, the Westerners obviously arrived earlier than them. We will gather in the VIP reception area on the 3rd floor. There are fewer people there. I think Westerners will also go there to wait. Gong Zihe took out 3 train tickets and handed them to Subai and Fatty. Let's go, check-in security check. Damn, do you want it to be so formal? The fat man was dumbfounded. The 3 of them went through the security check with their ID cards and train tickets, and then took the escalator to the 3rd floor. The 1st and 2nd floors were the train halls, which were crowded. After all, the Spring Festival had just ended, so the train passenger volume was now at a peak. Expect. As for the 3rd floor, there are places for dining and tea houses. There are a little few people. The fat man came up and took a look and said, well, some of the listeners have a relatively high status in the real world, so today the place has been booked and all the stores on the 3rd floor are closed. Gong Zihe explained. Hey, Dabai, you can do it if you don't scatter your money. The fat man stretched out. At this time, hey, I saw a lot of familiar people. At this time, a dozen Western listeners were all sitting in a coffee shop. Of course, there were no staff in the coffee shop. However, the number of Eastern listeners in the surrounding tea houses, fast food restaurants, and standing on the railings overlooking the scenery now exceeded 50. Maybe someone will come later. Go say hello, Gong Zihe said. The fat man nodded and followed Gong Zihe. Subai was standing on the escalator side, smoking quietly alone. At this time, in the back kitchen of an undecorated restaurant in the most remote northeast corner of the 3rd floor, about 20 people, both men and women, were crowded. They had come through the security check at the door before, and there were dedicated people responsible for getting there. The machete was brought here after passing the security check in the restaurant passage. The masked man put the devil mask on his face, clenched his fists at the believers around him and shouted. I saw it when I just came up. There are many passengers on the 3rd floor, and there are even foreigners. Haha, this is really an unexpected surprise. After we kill those foreigners, we are not afraid that the foreign media will not report it. Don't promote us. Everyone, this is the time when we swear our loyalty to Satan. Let's put on black clothes now. After getting ready, rush out with me. Start cutting from the 3rd floor first, then go to the 2nd floor, and finally go to the 1st floor. We want to turn this place into a sure field of blood and death, so that those who are stupid and don't know how to return will feel the fear from us. For Satan! For Satan! For Satan! The believers chanted. They come from all walks of life in reality. The youngest even looks to be only 16 or 17 years old, and the oldest is over 40. They have one thing in common, that is, they are not very happy in social life and have no existence. They feel spiritual emptiness and long for recognition and attention, and therefore, they gather here to prepare to do this kind of thing. Most people are thinking that after today, the whole world will know about them and recognize them. Everyone held machetes in their hands, and they couldn't wait to use their weapons to chop down the passengers. I can't wait to hear their wails and screams, I can't wait to see them kneeling and crawling around in front of me, running around. Really, I can't wait for a second. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 504. Why, don't you feel bored standing here smoking alone? Subai was standing by the glass railing on the third floor smoking a cigarette when a stranger's voice came from behind. It's okay. Subai shook off the cigarette ashes, turned around, and saw a tall but slightly thin man with dark skin. People from Xinjiang? Subai asked. China has a vast territory, and the differences in climate, geography, humanities, etc. are really huge. Different climate environments, different eating habits, and different lifestyles often bring about very obvious differences in the appearance of people's ethnic groups. Differences, when people from some provinces go to other provinces, can be easily distinguished by local people. Of course, with the advancement of transportation, culture, economy, and people's thinking patterns, population mobility has become countless times greater than it was 30 years ago. Population exchanges and activities have gradually given the characteristics of regional ethnic groups to it has gradually faded away. Coupled with the improvement of living conditions and the enrichment and popularization of material life, after another 40 years or 2 or 3 generations, it will be almost impossible to distinguish where a person comes from simply by their appearance. Difficult matter. Yes, I'm from Urumqi, the other person said with a smile. His teeth were very white, and he gave people a very generous feeling. But Xinjiang is not one ethnic group. There are more than 10 ethnic groups in Xinjiang. Generally speaking, it is very impolite to address people in this way. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend. Subai spread his hands to indicate that he had indeed made a slip of the tongue. It doesn't matter, I'm somewhat used to it. It's quite tiring to come all the way here. Subai smiled, took out a cigarette and handed it over. The other party took the cigarette and said, it's not far by plane. I have nothing to do. You might as well come and see the excitement. Do you want to meet me? My name is Avinal. Subai. The two simply said hello and stood together smoking. For smokers, this seemed to be a normal way of communicating. It looks like the train is coming soon. Avenir pointed to the sky outside the glass window. The sky is getting gloomier. I'm really looking forward to it. Subai shrugged. I feel like I'm waiting for the concert to start. It definitely feels that way, Avenir echoed, and there are fans from abroad. Avenir was obviously referring to the Western audience sitting in the coffee shop. Their appearance will at least prevent our own people from becoming so fierce in the next battle, Subai said. Yes, there is a sense of unity only under the premise of external pressure. As soon as Avenir finished speaking, he saw a Western woman walking towards here. The Eastern and Western listeners were on the third floor of the train station. They were completely different from each other. They were wary and hostile to each other. This Western woman who took the initiative to come over suddenly attracted the attention of many listeners from the East and the West. Dear Sue, how are you doing? Sophia opened her arms, indicating that she wanted to hug Subai. Subai threw away the cigarette butts between his fingers, took the initiative to meet Sophia, and hugged Sophia into his arms. He even hugged her sideways. Sophia has a standard pony figure. She feels very comfortable when held in her hand, and the friction and contact of her body parts can give men a great sense of satisfaction. Dear Sue, have you touched enough? Sophia looked at Sudbai with a half smile. There are quite a few hotels near the train station, Sudbai said. If you can help me grab something good today, I can give it to you tonight. Sophia was held in Sudbai's arms at this time, her fingertips gently caressing Sudbai's chest. Say, to be honest, Su, I didn't expect you to become a senior in such a short period of time. When I first met you in the story world, you were very weak. You know, in the animal world, the stronger the male, the more mating rights he has. Sudbai said seriously. By the way, why don't you help me grab something good tonight, and I'll give it to you tonight. What should I give it to you? Are you Chinese men so shameless? Sophia bit her silver teeth and said. Sudbai put Sophia down, and Sophia straightened her clothes without caring about the looks of other Eastern and Western audiences around her. Indeed. There's really nothing to care about. She may come back, Sophia asked. Of course, Sudbai knew who the she Sophia was referring to. The last time Sudbai went to the West, he was almost tricked to death by these Western listeners. If Jixiang hadn't simulated the scent of lychee and revealed it in London, it would have tricked these Western listeners. The audience was shocked. Maybe Sudbai had been eaten by that idiot. Now, Sophia took the initiative to approach him and express her affection. In fact, she wanted to find out the news. After all, the shadow left by lychee on the hearts of Western audiences was too great. Maybe he will come back, maybe he won't, Sudbai said. Nonsense, who knows? Yeah, who knows, Sophia sighed. Why has the vampire aura in you become so pure? Why, are you obsessed with my body odor? Sudbai teased. Sophia shook her head. No, it's because you have too many secrets. I think it's possible that when you become a senior listener, I will still be an ordinary senior listener. It seems that someone just said that to me a while ago. Sudbai thought of Gufan, but looked around and didn't see Gufan here. Maybe he didn't come, maybe he came but didn't go to the third floor. Because Gufan is from the Western audience circle, after coming up, will he sit with the Western audience in front of all the Eastern audience? This feeling is similar to the feeling of a traitor leading the imperial army into the village. As soon as he thought about this, a smile appeared on Sudbai's lips. Why are you laughing? Sophia asked. I laugh. Sudbai hasn't finished speaking yet. A dozen people wearing black clothes and holding machetes suddenly walked out of a very remote store in the northeast corner of the third floor. The leader wore a devil mask on his face, and some of the others behind him wore sheep-headed masks. Others covered their faces with black cloth. Satan supremacy! Satan supremacy! Satan supremacy! These 24 people shouted slogans and walked towards the side quickly. Everyone, hurry up. Don't let those foreigners escape. Those dozen foreigners must be hacked to death. You guys, go to the escalator and don't let them escape. The masked man was holding a machete and shouting slogans while also instructing the people around him how to act. At this moment, his chest was completely filled with that sacred feeling. The same goes for the 20 or so believers behind them. Their breathing began to become extremely heavy. Excitement, stimulation, tension, etc. can make people tremble and constantly stimulate their nerves. The 100 or so people in front of them are their first targets. After killing all these people, they will go to the second floor and the third floor. They will turn this place into a Shura field for the Supreme Being. Satan. Facing the 24 men in black who were holding knives and approaching menacingly, the audience from the east and west who were sitting or standing were suddenly stunned. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. What program is this? The Western audience seemed more nervous because they were in an away game and were really afraid of some conspiracy played by these Easterners. One of the elf enhancers had good hearing and could understand Chinese. He immediately said to the people around him, I heard it. It seems that the target of those people in black is us. They said they must not let us go. Several Western listeners around him couldn't sit still and immediately stood up. Boom. Lehman slapped the table and scolded, "Sit down, you are really experienced listeners. Your wisdom, your calmness, where have your eyes gone? Even if the Eastern listeners have low IQs and turn into pigs, there is no way they can arrange for 20 or so ordinary people to come here with ordinary machetes to kill us." The elf enhancer then realized that there was no energy fluctuation in the opponent's body. Either those 20 or so people are advanced listeners who can perfectly block their own aura, or they are indeed ordinary people. However, it is a well-known fact that senior listeners do not dare to come here, and can you imagine a group of senior listeners wearing black clothes, wrapping their bodies, holding machetes, and shouting Satan supremacy? The Western listeners were appeased, but they looked doubtfully at the surrounding Eastern listeners. The Eastern audience is in the same situation. "Damn it, this is a magic horse thing," Fatty whispered, who arranged the circus performance. Everyone froze in place, completely confused. "Ha ha ha, these passengers have been frightened by our formation. They even forgot to run. Kill, 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 kill them all, for Satan!" The masked man shouted. "For Satan! For Satan!" Seeing their prey in a completely frightened state, these Satan believers seemed very happy and proud. "Who are these people?" Sophia asks Yang Subai. Because Subai was standing far away from the crowd, that meant that when the group of Satan believers wanted to come, they would definitely have to pass in front of Subai first. "A bunch of boring people." Subai took a step forward, intending to take action to deal with these guys who were trying to make fun of him. However, a hand fell on Subai's shoulder. "It's Avenir. Remember the Kunming railway station incident?" Ivanil said, looking at Subai. "Remember? Okay, let me do it." Avenil walked out. 3 years ago, my wife was pregnant, and she often communicated with others in some pregnant mother groups to learn some parenting experiences. After that incident happened, a mainland pregnant woman in the group said directly to my wife, "What kind of children do you have in Xinjiang? They are just beasts when they are born." My wife was so sad that she cried for several days. It's a pity that I was not a listener at that time, but now, I am. Although these people seem to believe in another god called Satan, they actually plan to kill people in the train station. In my eyes, is the same, any organization that wields a sword against civilians is an unforgivable scum. Ivanil took the initiative to meet the 20 dozen Satan believers and walked over. Subai pursed his lips and shouted, "Hello." Avanil stopped and turned his head slightly. "That mainland pregnant woman who scolded your wife is the real beast. You are." Subai was thinking about whether this word was suitable to describe a senior audience, but after thinking about it, there was no more suitable one, so he continued, "You are a good person, and I wish your wife and children happiness and health." After saying that, Subai laughed himself. "Thank you, he. Ivanil himself couldn't help but smile and waved to Subai to express his gratitude. Immediately afterwards, he took the initiative to walk towards the Satan believers in front, and all the listeners present could sense the terrifying murderous intent emanating from him. The situation in China is really interesting. Sophia was obviously not talking about the 20 dozen Satanists. Subai glanced at Sophia unceremoniously. "If you have such thoughts, why don't you care more about the independence of the Irish, Scots, and Welsh in the UK?" Sophia smiled. Obviously, she couldn't refute it. The Scots had just held an independence referendum. Friends who read Long's books should all know that Long's views are very upright, because the readers of horror broadcast have relatively high IQs and appreciation levels, so Long will not do any stupid things with private goods. Long just wants to write a good story, but because of the subject matter and style of broadcast, it will inevitably be related to some things in reality. The content of this chapter is based on a message from a Xinjiang reader friend I read in the book review section last night, so I adapted this paragraph based on his experience. Here, Long sincerely wishes his family a happy family, his sister-in-law healthy and beautiful, and not to be harmed by rumors on the internet. Arrive. Long has always hated regional discrimination. In Long's view, people who like to play regional discrimination must be the most insignificant and low-level people in real life. They start to engage in regional discrimination when they really have nothing to show off. These people are the real dirty beasts. Sometimes we should not be too glassy. For example, at the beginning of the plot, Subai went to Josegu with a few students. Several Jiangsu students showed a disrespectful attitude towards the victims. I remember that at that time, some readers actually said that Long discriminated against Jiangsu people. In fact, everyone knows that Long himself is from Jiangsu, but that is Long's real experience. When Long went to Wenchuan that time, there were indeed a few fellow countrymen around him who showed an attitude towards the victims that made Long very disgusted. Basically, Long won't say too much at the end of the chapter, but when the plot reaches this point, Long must come out and state his position. I hope everyone understands. At last. Don't panic. Hug the dragon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao Long. Chapter 505. For Satan. For Satan. For Satan. 20 dozen black-clad believers held up machetes and started charging. They could no longer control the secretion of hormones in their bodies, and they could no longer control their desire for blood and killing. The bestiality deep in the human heart is fully aroused at this time. In the public thinking in the real world, it is the misleading and bewitchment of religion that makes some people become terrible executioners. In fact, it is better to say that religion has become a certain person. They are disguises and protective skins for those who are already mentally dark and perverted. Just as it seems that every criminal in media reports has poor factors and backgrounds such as family poverty and family breakdown, but not every poor person will become a criminal. Children from single-parent families will become hooligans. Subai was still standing there, looking at the believers who started to sprint, and suddenly felt a little funny, and subconsciously reached out and touched the tip of his nose. Is it true that at first glance, it's all the shadow of your past? Sophia interjected again at this time. Subai knew that she should have read his medical records before. I'm not like them, then or now. However, I can understand the feeling that is filling their hearts at this time. That kind of excitement, that kind of anticipation, that kind of pleasure where the blood seems to be burning at this moment, is really fascinating. That group of people was obviously preparing to kill for the first time. Subai could tell this. Sophia's eyes darkened, and she no longer looked at the massacre scene that was about to appear over there, but looked outside. The sky had become increasingly gloomy, and it was still far from dark yet. In the 2 floors below, there were many ordinary passengers. Sophia frowned because of this. As an audience, she didn't care much about the lives of ordinary people, but these ordinary people being here will undoubtedly affect the performance of the audience in the future. With them around, the audience will be restrained in anything they do. Broadcasting, what does it mean? The train should be arriving at the station, Sophia said thoughtfully. Yeah, it's almost here. Subai still seemed very relaxed. He came here with the mentality of watching a show and watching the excitement. He really didn't plan to go to the tiger's mouth to grab food and fight for something. He had no goal, so there's no pressure, right? This is a reflection of Subai's current mentality. Of course, most people present, including most Western listeners, actually have this mentality. Because everyone knows that the dangers in the story world are far less than the dangers of a group of listeners gathering together. Bone spurs burst out from Ivanil's body. White bone spurs grew out on his arms, ankles, and chest. He became much taller than before. This enhancement is quite new, Subai said to himself. Specializes in strengthening the attributes of the close body system. His bones are the source of his power. Even if the skin and flesh are peeled off, leaving only a skeleton, he can still maintain his activity and continue to fight, Sophia said. I remember you practice magic, right? Natural magic, Subai asked. Thank you for remembering me. I thought you had nothing worth remembering except my body. This may cause misunderstanding. I have children. Subai waved his hand, turned sideways, and walked towards the fat man. At this time, the train had not arrived, and all the audience present were sitting and standing, so most people's attention was on the massacre that was about to begin. The fat man didn't know where he got melon seeds and peanuts. He was peeling them and watching the show. When Subai came over, the fat man took a handful out of his pocket and handed them to Subai. Come on, Dabai, eat peanuts. Subai shook his head, indicating that he didn't need it, but gave the fat man a look. The fat man didn't understand, but nodded subconsciously, then stood up and walked with Subai to the escalator on the third floor. Puff. On the other side, Ivanir's bone spurs directly penetrated a Satanist and lifted him up. The opponent was not dead for a while, and was still struggling in pain while being lifted into the air. Originally, the sudden appearance of Avnei's bone spurs had stunned these Satan believers, and the fate of their companions made them even more frightened. No one dared to rush up to Avnei at this time. He attacked, but subconsciously took a few steps back. Even the masked man who took the lead did not dare to shout any more slogans at this time, because the blood of the lifted believer had been splattered on his face. The true face of the thugs is actually very clear. In fact, their violent nature has been revealed to the world countless times. If they really have the courage, if they really have faith, if they are really devout and fearless according to the doctrines they preach, then they can launch attacks on military facilities and bases instead of using their own, holding a butcher knife towards unarmed civilians, shouting noble slogans, but doing dirty things. This is the essence of most extremist organizations in the world today. Moreover, Avnei clearly does not intend to kill all these people as quickly as possible, but intends to take it step by step slowly, inflicting the fear they originally wanted to inflict on others. The physical and mental wounds they suffered were returned to them bit by bit in redoubled amounts. Snapped. The body of the believer on the bone spurs immediately exploded, his limbs were flying, his blood was flying, and his internal organs were flying everywhere. At this time, some of the Eastern and Western audience members who were sitting down stood up and set up several barriers to prevent the movement on the third floor from affecting the first and second floors. Well, they were afraid of affecting their viewing of the show. Dabai, have you discovered anything? Fatty asked in a low voice, pretending to be smoking with Subai. Subai shook his head. No, but I suddenly felt strange. Since the train is coming, why are there so many ordinary passengers here? As he said that, Subai stretched out his hand and pointed downward. So, what do you think the reason is? Gongzihai, where have you gone? Subai asked. The fat man was stunned and immediately looked around. Oh my God, that guy was next to me just now asking for melon seeds, but now he's here. There are also 2 fewer Westerners, Subai added. There are obviously 2 or 3 fewer people than when they took the bus out of the airport. Damn, Dabai, why didn't you tell me earlier? The fat man was a little embarrassed. Hey, are we just here to be the audience when we co-write? Subai took out his mobile phone, opened a ticket purchase software, and then clicked on the train for which tickets are usually never available. It showed that there were no remaining tickets, but when Subai clicked on it and applied for payment, the payment link, it was actually transmitted at this time, and in the end, the message "payment successful" was displayed. The fat man's eyes widened immediately. Fortunately, his body was relatively large, and he used his back to block other people's sight. In addition, the fat man had a lot of miscellaneous magic weapons, which could basically prevent other people's consciousness. Come and spy. You can buy the tickets. Subai pursed his lips. In fact, Subai himself didn't expect this scene. He was just a little strange before. If this train station is really an area of contention, then obviously, when the train arrives, after the station is reached, this place will inevitably become a dangerous place. There are so many ordinary passengers here, how can the broadcast be indifferent? Hurry up and buy one for me. You must have my ID card information in your account, the fat man quickly urged. Subai nodded, immediately clicked in and bought Fatty's ticket. Let's go get the tickets now, the fat man asked. Yes, the secret should be in the ticket, Subai guessed. Then, Subai looked at the ticket gates on the first and second floors. Nowadays, electronic ticket gates have been widely used in most cities in the country. Insert your own ticket, collect your own ticket and then go to the platform to train. This is my ID card. You go and get your ticket first. I'll wait here for a while. It would be too unsightly for the two of us to leave together. After you get your ticket, wait for me on the second floor and we'll check in together. Subai gave instructions to the fat man, then turned around and faced Sophia, who was walking towards the two of them. This British woman is really annoying. What did your friend do? Sophia asked, pointing to the fat man walking downstairs. He went to buy cigarettes. Subai made an excuse, and then he immediately started running towards Avenue. In fact, both Fatty and Subai knew that this matter must not be hidden. The Eastern and Western audiences here are not stupid. It is estimated that some people will react soon, but there are some things, even being a step earlier means that the difference between eating meat and not even drinking soup. Therefore, what he had to do now was to attract the attention of the people here as much as possible. After the fat man took out their train tickets, Subai went directly downstairs to check in with the fat man and enter the station. The train hasn't come yet, but it's okay to go to the platform now. A believer was running away. Subai's figure appeared behind him. He grabbed the believer's neck and lifted him up. Ivanil was slowly taking out the intestines of a believer and placing it in front of him. He seemed to have sensed Subai's arrival. He was slightly surprised and said, "Didn't you say I'm here? If you want these thugs to be punished and feared, I think I'm better at it than you are." After speaking, Subai raised the struggling believer in his hand and pointed at the East and West audience in front of him, shouting, "Is anyone interested in showing off their killing art? Anyway, these people won't be blamed at all for killing the radio. They are not believers of Satan. Then let's show them today. What is the true face of the devil?" As soon as Subai finished speaking, 4 or 5 Eastern and Western listeners stood up and eager to try, and even more frivolous listeners clapped and whistled. Obviously, the thugs who are very scary to ordinary people, in the eyes of this group of senior listeners. It's just a toy that can be kneaded at will. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 506. When it comes to the experience of death, listeners are of course experts among experts. The story worlds carefully designed by radio broadcasts ensure the storytelling required by broadcasts to the greatest extent. The 3-word storytelling rely on this is reflected in the listener's narrow escapes and struggles over and over again. For the audience, there are countless people they have seen killed and people they have killed. When the initial panic as experiencer slowly faded away with time and environment, they became experienced listeners and already had a heart as hard and cold as stone. Killing is an art, and death is also an art. In any matter, in all walks of life, when reaching the extreme and the top, his art can be derived. Subai didn't think that he and the zombie boy were the only ones who felt this way. Of course, others might not be as perverted or as extreme as him, but people like Fatty were still so terrifying when they killed and tortured people. As you can imagine, this method is not uncommon among listeners, especially senior listeners. At this moment, 6 or 7 audience members came over. They each caught one or two thugs like an eagle catching a chicken, and then tortured and killed them in their own way, starting their own performance. The scene was once very bloody and very beautiful. There was a Western listener who looked polite, but a long tongue similar to a snake's tongue stuck out of his mouth and entered the mouth of the thug in his hand, and then began to suck together, directly sucking the thug. Together with the organs in his body, they were all messed up. After finishing, he put his long tongue back into his mouth, licked his lips with relish, and then bowed to all the Eastern and Western audiences present. It is as if an artist has just finished displaying his masterpiece and then expresses his gratitude to the audience who admired him. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for supporting me. Although some people in the audience were not very enthusiastic about things like torture and killing, they were not disgusted by such scenes. Most people still clapped their hands to express encouragement. At this time, the Eastern and Western audiences actually reached a very friendly and harmonious atmosphere, just like a sorority party between the two parties. However, the programs performed at the sorority were not so easily accepted by the public. These thugs witnessed their companions dying tragically in front of them one by one. Before they died, they were still under extremely terrible psychological pressure. No, they no longer had the so-called psychological defense line. When Satan's still terrifying people came out to massacre themselves and others, they would have collapsed into a complete mess. Begging for mercy. Cry for mercy. Those who kowtow. Tears streaming down his face. The few remaining people behaved in all kinds of ugly ways, and even the one who kowtowed the most was the leader wearing a mask. In fact, they had realized before that they would not be able to escape the law after killing someone at the train station. Many of them even had the mentality that even if they died after doing this, their life would not be in vain. However, in this situation, in the face of this scene, they finally knew what was more terrifying than death. Sudbai walked up to this person with a smile, gently caressed his face, and then pushed him to a vinyl. He took a few steps back and looked at his clothes with some disgust. It was stained with a lot of blood. Everyone, please continue, I'm going to find a passenger below to change into clean clothes. After Sudbai finished speaking, he walked to the escalator and stood on the elevator and slowly went down, while the rest of the people present continued to enjoy the performance. Only Sophia looked at Sudbai's back with a little surprise, but she just looked at it. 10 minutes later, the performance ended. There was a large pile of corpses left here, and the ground seemed to have been washed with blood. The dazzling bright red seemed to fit the flavor of the new year that had not completely dissipated, becoming the end of the year. The last kind of joy. Yes, festive. Although the 20-odd people who had just been tortured to death were all Chinese, none of the Eastern listeners present felt uncomfortable with it. Even if there were Western listeners in attendance, they did not have the slightest feeling that aliens and foreigners were slaughtering my compatriots. Shame. Because when these people came to the train station wearing black clothes and holding machetes and preparing to commit murder, they could no longer be regarded as Chinese. They could not even be regarded as human beings. They were just a group of beasts, a group of livestock, and a group of farmers who ate the resources of a civilized society. A white-eyed wolf who longs to take revenge by transforming into a beast for his so-called bullshit beliefs. A Western audience member who had just killed someone wiped his palms with a tissue and said to himself in confusion, "What on earth is religion?" It happened that an Eastern audience passed by him at this time, heard what he said, stopped, and said in English, "In the past, religion was called feudal superstition in our country." Feudal superstition, obviously, this Western listener does not understand Chinese very well. Sometimes, it's really ridiculous. Modern civilization is obviously based on industrial civilization and technological civilization. Religion is obviously an extremely ignorant theory, but now, it has become a protected animal. Everyone knows in their hearts that it is false, and we all know that in reality, there is no God and no hell, but we still have to respect those believers. This is political correctness, especially in the West. This Western audience member smiled bitterly. I am a German. The Eastern audience gloated unkindly. That's great. When a group of people obviously believe in false ideas, obviously believe in wrong ideas, and obviously believe in ridiculous ideas, the atheists who are surrounded by a large number of people must still respect them and respect them. No people dare to question the right of their beliefs, but no one dares to do so because it will be considered immoral and uncivilized. This kind of political correctness is really disgusting. Actually, it feels much better to think about it from another angle. Just think of it as caring for fools. The Eastern listener subconsciously wanted to reach out and pat the Western listener on the shoulder, but suddenly realized the opposition between the two camps, and then give up. Actually, we also have faith. The Western audience pointed to the top of their heads. This is the real faith. It will ravage us, it will torture us, and it will make us likely to die at any time, but I dare to believe that the vast majority of the audience actually treats God with the same reverence as Christians, or even more reverence than God. Is this also a kind of stupidity? Is this also a kind of irony? Absolutely. The person I am watching the scenery on the bridge is watching you upstairs. When we comment on other believers being fools, we are not even more ridiculous fools. When it comes to radio, both Eastern and Western listeners actually have similar feelings. This feeling is a bit like the radio has tortured me 1,000 times and I treat it like my first love. Listeners, sometimes are really meaner. Sophia suddenly noticed that Subai hadn't chosen clothes after so long. Then, his friend seemed to have gone to buy cigarettes and never came back. Sophia immediately looked around seriously. The number of people didn't match up. Not only Subai and the two of them, but others also disappeared quietly during the killing show just now. Naturally, they were not killed. Damn it, you're a solitary eater. Sophia immediately took out her mobile phone and checked the arrival time of the train. However, she was immediately surprised to find that the train for which tickets could never be purchased actually displayed the words "plenty of remaining tickets" on her mobile phone. And some listeners who had already set up the ticket reminder plug-in also felt the reminder vibration on their mobile phones at this time. Bye-bye, hurry up. The fat man handed the ticket to Subai, and then squeezed through with his fat body. When the two of them squeezed to the front unethically, the fat man said worriedly, "Dabai, according to the display on the phone, we haven't reached the ticket check time yet. Swipe your tickets first and sneak in. Gongzihai and the others must have already entered. Yes, let's go in first." This was the ticket checking time for another train. Subai and Fatty inserted their tickets into the ticket gate respectively, and then the tickets were drawn in. After the ticket checking was completed, they popped out of the opening in front, and the fence in front was also at this time open. The fat man took out the ticket, crossed the fence, and then disappeared in front of Subai. Subai's pupils shrank, and sure enough, he entered like this. Taking out his ticket, Subai also passed the fence. Then he felt that his surroundings were suddenly spinning, and the fat man's plump body appeared in front of Subai. Damn, Dabai, this train station is so overbearing. The fat man said in shock. Subai walked out from behind the fat man. The scene in front of him also made Subai very unexpected. All around was a grey sky, and in front of him was a huge pit with yellow, dirty river water and countless bones. A railway runs through the pit and extends to here. All around, there was a gloomy wind, as if you were in a bi hell. Dabai, we really came in a little early. As soon as the fat man finished speaking, he heard a plop sound. Subai had already jumped into the pit and started walking forward along the railway track. Wait for me. The fat man no longer hesitated, jumped down, and followed Subai. Dabai, why do I feel that the surrounding environment is so weird? Ah, this is a good thing. Subai looked at the fat man in surprise and said. What a good thing, The fat man didn't know why. It means you're not blind.